Slow negatives are not helping your gains, and you should stop them if you want to keep your progress on track as fast as possible. The concept of going slower on your negatives or your eccentrics is based on quite a few things that have progressively, one by one, all been disproven as research has gotten more and more current. I want to say this is old information, but to be honest, there's still a lot of people around who believe this now, but it's been well disproven at this point that muscle damage, inflammation, and the pump all aren't triggers for muscle growth. But because all of those things have been features of eccentric-based training where you get more damage, more swelling, more inflammation, and more blood flow, the old adage that that was actually beneficial has meant that people for years have thought that negatives were an essential part of effective muscle growth and training. As it turns out, all that extra swelling, damage, inflammation, all that was doing was actually contributing negatively to your training and your gains by blowing out your recovery time, meaning that you get less effective concentric reps and reducing your tolerance to more overall volume. The thing that does actually cause muscle growth is called mechanical tension, and if you've been paying attention to much research lately, you might know already you do actually get more tension on the negatives. The reason that doesn't actually turn into more muscle growth though is because the tension that's applied is only to some muscle fibers and actually not the biggest ones that you want the growth in most. This is because as soon as your brain starts to relax a muscle and let the weight lower, it actually switches off the high threshold motor units, which are the parts of the muscles that contain the biggest fibers that you're actually trying to target with strength training. This means that even when you're struggling on those later reps, you're not actually even activating the parts of the muscle that you really want to grow most. There are actually some studies that do show that negative only training is as good or sometimes even better than concentric training or full reps for muscle growth. And this is where you'll see a lot of people online who don't really know how to read or interpret scientific studies start to get confused and start to make claims that negative training is superior. The confusion comes from the fact that these studies aren't just getting people to slow down or focus more time or attention on their negatives during their regular full reps. What they do instead is they skip the concentric entirely, get people to focus only on the negatives, and they actually give them higher loads and higher weights than they could do if they were doing the concentric or doing a full rep. This means that the benefits they get from doing these negatives don't come from the fact that they're focusing on the negatives, it comes from the fact that they're using much higher loads and getting way more muscular stimulus so that those activation problems that they would have on a usual eccentric, they manage to avoid by just using a much higher load than they could even do for a full rep. And if you know much about muscle growth studies, you'll know that how they measure hypertrophy is always a little bit wishy-washy because of the swelling and inflammation that's really hard to avoid measuring when you're trying to do these studies. And considering the fact that slow negatives always end up giving you more muscle damage and swelling, it's almost certain to say that at best, these studies only showed that negatives gave you at least equivalent results, but most likely worse than full reps. So rather than going super slow with all your negatives, what you're better off doing is staying fast with your concentrics, keeping up that explosive full activation power on your reps, and then just controlling the negatives at a tempo that lets you reproduce it with good form every time and without running into any kind of injuries as a result of losing control of your reps. Technical exercises like slow muscle ups or handstand push-ups are ones where you're probably going to want to do some slow negatives because developing that control or that balance is a key part of the actual movement. But that's not because you're expecting to get any muscle growth out of those, it's because they're skill-based movements and developing skill requires a lot of practice. And initially, before you're good at that, slowing things down allows you to get that practice and make those small technical tweaks mid-rep that you can't make when you're trying to do things faster. And because muscle growth is essential for good long-term strength development, it is essential for you to understand these principles because you need to know what's effective for growth and what's effective for strength and how to mix the two. And if you want more information on putting the two together, check out this video.